Świat zamówień publicznych jest bardzo mały. Podczas konferencji na University of Al Quwain spotykamy się w gronie także dość zaskakującym. Dzisiaj wraz ze mną są także pani profesor Amarissimo Wart, a także profesor Kari Ginter z Estonii, których gościłem już na kanale na YouTube. Zatem przy tym stole w Zjednoczonych Emiratach Arabskich zasiada w tej chwili troje prawników, dwoje z Estonii, jeden z Polski i oczywiście nasuwa się jedno oczywiste pytanie. Co my tu robimy? Czego my tutaj poszukujemy? I właśnie takie pytanie chciałem zadać moim gościom. What are we even doing here? Three lawyers from Estonia and one lawyer from Poland. At first glance we represent countries that from the perspective of Al Quwain, the perspective of United Arab Emirates are exotic and vice versa. What are you looking for at this conference? Why did you decide to visit Al Quwain at this conference, Professor?
Yes, well, I think we all agree this is really a unique, one-of-a-kind event. And what's typical to these conferences is that they don't only gather, you know, as in this case you said, Europeans and then people from United Arab Emirates, but it's actually all over the world. And it is sometimes kind of good to get out of the bubble, you know, look at the things from perspective that is not Eurocentric, to have reflect the ideas with researchers and scholars, you know, for instance, from Turkey, the United States of America, and other parts of the world, and it can give you very good feedback. Like you would know, you would come to ideas that seem maybe not ordinary, you know, maybe drastic, but maybe they aren't. So I think it's a very good feedback. And the discussion today after our presentations was really interesting and lively, wasn't it?
Yes. I think that it's worth sometimes. You know, we keep looking at London and Frankfurt and Brussels and Stockholm and so on. And sometimes it's worth just to shake your own bubble a little bit and move out of it. And I am here to meet people from different jurisdictions than I'm used to working with every day. Yeah. And it's been successful so far, in a sense that that you know the points that they make, the questions that they give you, they are different than what you would get you know in a conference like we'll have to go to Nottingham and other places. So just a little bit different. But I'm not saying it's better, but I'm just saying it's a little bit helps you to refocus and think a little bit more about maybe we don't have all the right answers in Europe, and maybe they actually have a point somewhere which is worth copying or learning from.
Yeah. And I would add that you know, that is especially true in the case of the topic that we are researching. We have the Estonian research grant to look into issues outside of written public procurement law, like in cases where there are exceptions to the procurement rules, where the contracting authorities have quite a lot of discretion how they act. Do they buy the necessary things or the services via a procurement procedure, or do they order it somehow differently on quite legitimate grounds? But still, certain rules apply to this process, and they have certain diligence obligations. And because there are no written detailed rules under the EU law, of course there is a primary law that we have to consider the general principles, but no detailed prescriptions. So in such a project in particular, it is very useful to have input from, you know, as far as possible.
Okay, so the collision of such different perspectives, of course, may be very inspiring, very fruitful from the perspective of academia, for sure. But do you think whether it may be also useful and inspiring as well from the perspective of practitioners? I could say that from my perspective and from the perspective of my own experience, lawyers specialize or especially focus on the problemacy of the local content, which is rather a taboo from the European perspective. It's very worthy to have an opportunity to discuss on this problemacy with people from legal systems, which includes regulations of local content. For example, for our colleagues from South Africa, but also United Emirates, something like local content requirements, it is obvious. And when I realized that, I admit that I take advantage of this knowledge also in my professional practice. Have you heard something, anything directly useful that you know that it will be useful in your practical perspective, or not yet? Or maybe in general, do you think that it may be useful also for the practitioners?
In general, one thing is legal knowledge, and of course you take notes and you notice something that you have missed in your thinking. But it's also for practitioners, just being visible, just meeting people in other jurisdictions. That is a big part of what we do. That's a big part of what we do. We travel, we meet people, and years later it turns into business or mandates from somewhere else, or an invite to another event, or a team working for a client, for example. So it's these kind of things are extremely practical. Just meet lawyers from, practitioners and academics from other countries. That's very, very, very practical.
Yes, I would say that, because I'm not a practitioner, I'm an academic. A part of the output that we give in the academic work can be directed to the legislators or the interested groups, and via that to the legislators. So perhaps looking at things from a very different perspective can give you input in this direction, like advertise more, taking the advantages from exceptions that the directives allow as a practical means, because that was a question during our discussion that I noticed. People from outside the EU ask, how is your national law different from the directives? And very often we had to answer, in this case, we copy the directives exactly. And another question, again, our law is exactly like the directives. And they were a little bit surprised. And we all know, of course, sometimes there is a maximum harmonization required and you have to have the exact same law, but not always. And sometimes when the harmonization level is lower, you could make exceptions, but not always does the legislator maybe, touch these options. Maybe sometimes it's easier to rely on the directive as it is. So this is actually another project we're kind of looking into a little bit. Is there a way to make the procurement easier on the national level? For instance, when the cases are on the thresholds of directives, or then also above the thresholds in the scope that the directive allows, to take more advantage of that, to use those benefits more. That could be another.
So for sure, it's confirmed that it's worth collision, not only different perspective, but very, very exotic and very distant perspective, but also our close perspective. Oh, sorry.
But no. As a lawyer, you're often invited to think out of the box. Come up with something creative, and hear how something is done in Africa, and somewhere in Asia or right here. At one day you will need this thinking and say, but why not this way? Maybe what we could actually approach this. So you have this, you have to mess with your brain a little bit so that it becomes more creative.
Yeah. Because sometimes we can find completely different way of solving the same problem. Yes. Because that, what can we say? Problems are very often and too often very similar. Okay.
Yeah, that's true. I believe when you go to conferences, one of the obvious purposes is to present your research and to have feedback and to listen others' research and give feedback. But there's a different level. Is exactly the creativity that you mentioned, like the general creativity. You open up your head to be outside the box. So this is always a very big value.
I agree.
Okay. So thank you very much for your feedback and for this comparative perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you.